Hi, and welcome to Boomerang Talks, online edition. Today we're talking about work and the role it plays in our lives. Between purpose, productivity, and burnout, we want to know, is work the new religion? Work has one very obvious purpose. But on the other hand, it's also where many of us seek fulfillment and meaning. Over the last century, there's been a steady decline of religion and traditional faith. The Netherlands ranks as one of the countries with the most atheists, with around half the people identifying as non-religious. So what have we replaced this worship with? Well, some people worship football, other people worship beauty, and for some of us, it's the work we do. Derek Thompson, a staff writer at The Atlantic, coined the term workism to describe this phenomenon. It's the belief that work is not only necessary for economic production, but it's the centerpiece of one's identity and life's purpose. A Pew Research report on the epidemic of youth anxiety showed that 95% of people think that a job or career that they really enjoy is very important to them as an adult. So how did we get here? Let's look at how work started. Before the Industrial Revolution, which is really when people started having what we think of as jobs, people were born into a profession. Your father was a fishmonger, you were a fishmonger. In the Renaissance, it was Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci that created something that's closer to the work we have today. Selling your talent to the highest bidder, but not just for work, but also for creative fulfillment and meaning. In 1520, Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, articulated the idea that work is moral. God endows people with talent, and through even simple work like being a milkmaid, a repairer, or a cleaner, you can serve God. Quick side note, Martin Luther looked more like this. I thought the casting in that movie was a bit of a stretch. The Industrial Revolution brings industrial labor. Work is not pleasant for most. In 1844, Karl Marx first writes about the idea that labor is boring and doesn't help people grow towards personal development. It's a key flaw he saw in capitalism. He thought that work should be enjoyable and suit the talent of the worker. We basically went from having a job to a career to a calling. Take, for instance, the Tesla anti-handbook handbook. We're Tesla, and we're changing the world. We prefer to have incredibly high standards and to hire exceptional people who enjoy pushing themselves to perform at the highest levels every day. Elon, what a rebel. #hustle. In fact, many people idolize this behavior, this idea that work is everything because, we might be changing the world, or becoming the 1%, or getting a sick car. #hustle culture looks something like this on Instagram. Motivational quotes that sound almost religious. One of the problems with our work today is that work is leaky, as in it leaks into our leisure time. Nowadays, we WhatsApp our friends from the office, we get work emails on the weekend, we could listen to music at work, or listen to an educational podcast while we relax. The pandemic has made this phenomenon even more extreme. Take where I live. That's where I work, that's where I have leisure time. Hard to make a separation, right? And then there's burnout. Burnout is a disease that results from chronic workplace stress. It's on the rise even in countries like the Netherlands that have really good work-life balance. Here to help us understand a little bit more about it is our first guest of the day, TeLisa Daughtry, award-winning technology and diversity advocate. TeLisa, thanks so much for joining us at the studio today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yay.
First, maybe just tell us a little bit about your life.
Wow, interesting. Okay, I'll dive right in. So I am a Boston girl through and through, but I left Boston at the age of 19 in pursuit of my dreams, like how most young people do. They gravitate towards New York City. I was able to work for some incredible media companies, specifically MTV, which was my dream company to be at. Being in that space pretty much helped me to navigate as a woman in tech professionally and a tech professional. And then after going through homelessness, people don't mention that with New York City. After going through homelessness and living on the E train for 6 months, I actually, determined to make it in New York City. I decided to relocate back to Boston after about 8 years in New York City. And then I landed an incredible opportunity to move to the Bay Area, and I worked with a lot of tech companies and startups, and I learned that that industry and that space specifically was very difficult to navigate, especially being an intersectional woman, meaning a person of color and a woman being in that space, and then, navigating to senior leadership positions, and just being in that space made me realize and recognize how lonely and difficult it can be for others who are coming after me. So in 2015, I decided that I wanted to build a product to help women and girls navigate their tech journeys. And that's how I became the founder and chief technology officer of Fly Technista, which is a mobile app.
Would you say that being a woman of color has affected you to work even harder, maybe?
Absolutely. I specifically feel like, even though I mentioned a lot about our self-imposed deadlines, there's also this self-imposed expectation that I felt that I had to live up to, specifically being a woman of color, because I thought of myself often, or seen myself, or realized that I am the only me in many of the spaces that I've occupied, and felt overly the need to over communicate that not only did I deserve to be there, but I worked to be there, that I also didn't want to disappoint, because if I was the only interaction or experience that a person had with someone like me, what does that look like for the next person who doesn't get an opportunity because I didn't show up the way that they expected me to? So I would definitely say, yes, absolutely. Whether that be as a professional, whether that be as an entrepreneur, I've definitely felt the need to over communicate, demonstrate worthiness, value, the fact that if I don't do that, what does that look like for the next woman of color, a person of color who was occupying or navigating the spaces that I'm in.
What do you think of the idea that work may have replaced religion?
Yeah, this is something that I heavily meditate on, because it has become to a point that we're so driven by our self-imposed deadlines that we actually make work replace religion in some cases. And you also have to look at it as, if work has replaced religion, then essentially our labor and our pursuits of titles become acts of worship. And that's scary, and it's sad also.
You yourself experienced burnout back in 2017. What did your life look like leading up to that point?
So I will definitely say this. 2017 was a very lucrative and successful outwardly year for me, but internally it was very draining. And, burnout occurred as a result of that. So let me just put in perspective of what that year looked like for me. So, I was building our second product myself, and then building my core team, hiring people on my core team. I was raising capital and seeking capital. I was scaling global partnerships. At the time, I was about 680 something partners. And this is just from 2015 to 2017 with no biz dev experience. Yeah, it was crazy. I was also participating in 3 intensive accelerator programs. I was participating and pitching in every pitch competition, every media press opportunity I got, and, also trying to balance my personal life. And, as you can imagine, it was stressful, it was difficult, and there were so many things that, outwardly people thought, wow, TeLisa is killing it. But in reality, all of those things was slowly killing me. And I don't mean that in a joking way. It actually led me to being in the ER 3 times in the month of October 2017. I would wake up working, and then I would fall asleep working. Like, you don't go to bed, you just fall asleep working. Like, that was my routine. That was the cycle. And it was so unhealthy. And yeah, that was what everything looked like at that time. So scary. Wow.
You mentioned that people were saying that you were killing it. Do you think that we idolize potentially unhealthy behavior that can lead to burnout?
People often think that certain people who achieve a lot are just high performers, or, it's like most of the things that we do is because we have our own self-imposed deadlines. It's like when I think of myself as a startup founder and even as an employee, there were things and burdens, I will say, burdens that I often placed upon myself and expectations I often placed upon myself that weren't necessarily given to me by a client, a customer, my manager, whoever. Like these were things that I felt driven to do, but it's really because of the end goal that we see, like whether it be a title that we want, opportunity that is in alignment with something that we're seeking. So we push ourselves, and we push ourselves thinking that this there is going to be this pot of gold and this perfection, and it's really insanity. Like it's really insanity. Like so, when people are thinking about someone killing it, you also have to think of how they're balancing it, because that's what really matters. It's not about killing it. It's about balancing all the things that you're killing it to do that might be killing you. And even as a manager, I'm really big on giving people their time back. You can't do anything if you can't do anything. If you're not allowed to do anything, you can't do anything. So I need you to take care of yourself. I need to take care of myself, and we have to do better at taking care of ourselves rather than just our businesses, the brands, or the companies that we work for.
Burnout is on the rise, also here in the Netherlands. What do you think are signs that people should watch out for?
The World Health Organization had actually upgraded burnout as an actual disease. So it's not just a disorder that we have, it's an actual chronic disease that we develop as a result of all the things that we take on. So I will say, not every disease manifests the same way in our body, just like stress. So stress and burnout doesn't often look like the same thing for different people. So the first things that I realized with my own stress was, pain basically is the body's way of telling us that something is wrong. And basically, my body was screaming at me, but I just was not listening. It was screaming at me with headaches. It was screaming at me with arm and hand pain. It was screaming at me with muscle pain, with heart palpitations, with all kinds of things, with blurred-eyed vision from looking at my screens for an overexposed amount of time. And, my body was definitely screaming at me, and I really didn't listen. So what I often advise people who feel that they might be going through burnout is to really, really listen to your body. Pay attention to your red flags. Pay attention to the things that are triggering to you, whether it be triggering emotionally, physically, specifically, or even mentally, the things that are taxing on your thoughts and on your mind. So pay attention to your triggers, pay attention to the red flags, and definitely pay attention to your body.
Once you had the burnout diagnosis, how did you bounce back?
So yeah, more than focusing on bouncing back, I actually, again, back to balance. I figured out, like, I don't want to bounce back to what I was or what I was doing. I don't need that. I actually need to put new and better habits in place that will be sustaining to the change that I need to bring in myself to show up for myself. Like, first things that I started to do was being mindful of that and being aware of, the things that led me into that space, how to recognize those things. So I love writing about my day and what I've observed and what I ate. So pretty much I've been keeping several journals over the last, I would say, 7 or so years, with everything from gratitude to my health to food, to my sleep and dreams, and even specifically after this, very mindful of stress. So I keep a stress journal.
I love how you point out that we can't just bounce back as human beings as if we could be turned on and off.
Our words have so much power. And I don't want to ever feel like I'm just an object bouncing from one experience to another experience. I want to be intentional about my actions. So I can't use words like bounce back.
During the pandemic, lots of people have started to reflect more on their lives, and many have said that they want more meaning. What would you recommend to them?
As a designer, you often have to justify to clients or stakeholders what you're doing and why you did it. So, when I think of that framework to apply professionally, I also think about it, personally. What and whys, like that is what keeps you going when times is hard. Understanding your personal what and why, what am I doing? Why does this matter? Like that will help you keep going. Lastly, for myself, is the fact that I serve others. You know, being in service to others gives me purpose because we're not just here for ourselves. We're not just here for our works. We're not just here for the titles. We're not even here for the paychecks. Like, we're really just here for each other and to be in service of each other. And I think, like, once we move from a space of being in service to our egos or our titles or those other things, and we shift to being in service to others, that's how we truly find meaning in the work that we do and in our work and in our lives.
Thank you so much for joining us and all your valuable advice. TeLisa mentioned creating healthy habits and investing in your own well-being. One increasingly popular practice is meditation. Last year, the meditation app Calm was valued at $1 billion. But what can we learn from this ancient practice? Here to talk about it is our next guest. Venerable Losang Gendun is a Dutch Buddhist monk who has collectively spent over 3 years in retreat. Maybe for those who don't already know, how would you describe Buddhism?
The Indian word is Dharma, which makes far more sense. Dharma has a lot of meanings, but I often say that it is an attempt to understand the world such that it benefits others. So it is a formulation of an understanding of the world that is pedagogical, that is therapeutic, that is geared towards benefiting someone else.
What is life as a monk like?
Well, actually, the word monk is a Christian word. We use it, not always equally, not always as applicable. I like the idea. My name Gendun actually refers to my community, the Sangha. It's a Tibetan translation of the word Sangha. And equally, if you would translate that very liberally, no, not so liberally actually, it would mean a community of those that seek virtue. So in ancient India, you would see, if you study the historical perspective, that there was space within society that was supported by society for people to search for the purification, the purity of mind. So to like travelers or explorers of the mind in order to find healing. And so my day evolves around that single thing because I ask for an existence independence. I ask for support, donations, food donations, so that I don't have to work and I can focus on a single thing. As we do equally with scientists, for example, we pay scientists so that they don't have to do anything else and can research what we want them to research. And so in a way, traditionally I would be freed from additional tasks in society, from societal roles, so that I can dedicate my life to a single thing, the search of freedom for the benefit of others. Usually for a monk, I get up reasonably late, 5:30, but that's because I teach often in the evening. So,
Did I just hear you say you get up late, as in 5:30?
Yeah, I lived for a while in Burma, and there my last session ended at 11, and in the morning the gong in the valley in which my monastery was rang at 3:30. I sleep in for 2 hours now. And then my daily life is a mixture of meditation, of prayer, studies, of course, especially the Tibetan tradition values studies very highly, but also pastoral work, organizational work with regard to my Trade Institute here in Amsterdam. And then often in the evenings or in weekends, I teach. I teach 4 programs, a mixture of Buddhist psychology, philosophy, and meditation. Yeah, then when that has ended, I go back to my meditation cushion, do my last session, and go to bed.
So meditation apps are huge. What do you think of the fact that meditation has become so popular?
Well, I think a lot of things about this. First of all, I think now if people find anything in Buddhist ideas or Buddhist methodology or Buddhist psychology that is beneficial, they should definitely use that. The Buddha offered this for the welfare of others. And he did not give any requirements with it. Like, you can only use my method if you believe in me or whatever. He always said, try it. If you hear something that what I have to say that makes sense to you, then try it. And if it doesn't make any sense to you, then please leave it. So to the extent that people find benefit, even in their working lives in meditation, of course, that's absolutely great. What I would like, though, is like with scientific literature, that people would do a little bit more of source referencing. Like, where does this come from? Because we have 2,500 years of meditational experience. That means that our scriptures are very professional, very detailed, And I think, like with any scientific theory, if you want me to accept it or to use it not to use its results in my life, I need to be able to check back, like, where does this come from? Meditation is not so much about relaxing. No, relaxing is a thing that we do sometimes, just to create a break between the complexity of life and meditative practice. But let's be honest, Buddhist meditative practices incur also a number of methods that are not always that relaxing, that are confrontational, that want to uproot our habitual behavior, and that is sometimes not so easy to give up.
Well, what's a good place to start for people who want to dig a little bit deeper?
I think one of the greatest tips is to realize that our perception is not neutral. It says what we see, what we think we see about ourselves and others is highly influenced from where we get from. And one of the things that meditation helps doing is to look at ourselves and our world in a more skillful way. So to address that aspect, so to learn to adopt different ways of looking at ourselves and to see what they do, what they deliver, and if that heals our place amidst others and heals the place of others in our own lives.
So, what do you think about the fact that people incorporate meditation as a productivity tool in our work culture?
It depends on how you define work in a way. No, I work hard. So is that in itself a problem? Of course it isn't. It depends on what the reason is that you want to do that. So I work hard because I'm driven by a certain spiritual idealism, one could say, or an insight with regard to how I relate to others. And so, unifying my vision in that sense and my daily activity, of course, allows me to work very hard. But if work becomes, and I think that is the bigger problem, is that it comes from a perspective of hedonism, of believing that satisfaction comes from outside of us. And that is very unskillful because it is not even plausible. Because well-being or happiness, whatever you call it, is an aspect of the mind. It is a way that our mind tells us how we relate to that world. Now, if we externalize that, then we give the control over our well-being away to things that are external to us. And they can never satisfy us because they are not stable. I always joke with my students, if my happiness is dependent on chocolate mousse, then of course, then that means that I have to keep running to the grocery store next door in order to keep buying it, and I grow fat and unhealthy, and I will kill myself. And I will never be satisfied, because in the end, once you have eaten a certain amount, it makes you sick.
Over the last months, obviously, everyone's been spending a lot of time indoors, and we feel like people have been searching for meaning or purpose more. But where should they start?
Well, one of the central notions, the most important notion, to put it better, within Buddhism is interdependence, or as the Vietnamese teacher Thich Nhat Hanh often says, interbeing. There is a balance between our own mental health and the healthy relationship that we have to our world. And that, of course, is our purpose. We are an aspect of life. Life as a larger phenomena has produced us. So what is our purpose? Is, of course, the sustenance of life. And what does all life want is to evade, of course, suffering and to obtain well-being, to obtain happiness. So to the extent that we contribute to happiness of others and to ourselves, the more we have responded to what it means to have purpose. And of course, that can be in an infinite amount of ways. It can be that you're a nurse, that can be that you're a school teacher, that can be that you're a manager and that you arrange, you allow people to work in a well-arranged environment. But to understand that, to say like, okay, I do what I do in order to use the qualities of my mind in order to deepen my relationships to others and to be beneficial is the answer to purpose.
So the main question today is, has work replaced religion? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, in the absence of religion, we just try to make do with the next best thing. At the same time, I think it's also highly dependent on fashion, if you wish. Yeah? I think most of us try to follow the safe way. And so we accept, or we are inclined to accept that what the majority is doing must be somehow worthwhile. While it's of course definitely not necessarily the case. Work should serve us as a human being. Our lives are extraordinarily short. If we choose to entertain ourselves or to become slaves to our work, then we fail to perceive that which is the most single important aspect about living is life itself. Now we are always running away from that one thing, and so that is a shame. There's a Dutch philosopher whose name escapes me for the moment, but years ago in an interview he said, even if you look at our language, if we have free time, what do we do with it? And the expression is we kill it. So if we have leisure, if we have the space and the time to give our life purpose, we switch on Netflix. We run away from that phenomena. We have such an incapacity to deal with living itself that we need distraction. And I think that is one of the major aspects why we get so lost in work on the one hand and entertainment on the other hand, because no one teaches us anymore how to live. And I think now the time is over to come up with dogmatic answers, because I think that was the big problem that religions in the end introduced.
All right, well, thank you so much for being here today.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
And now for our next segment, confession time. We asked around to hear some confessions around the craziest things you've done for work. Let's check it out.
I once had to organize a party for a bunch of influencers, and then actually had to go to that party and babysit their table while they were getting super, super, super drunk. That was interesting.
I was on my way to a camping trip with a group of friends in rural Maine, finishing up a work project in the passenger side seat. And I couldn't finish it in time, so I begged the driver to pull over to the last piece of civilization, which was like a rural rest stop before we lost cell service and I couldn't send any emails. And it was a beautiful day, and everybody else was back at the campsite fishing and canoeing and doing fun stuff, and I ended up keeping him at that gas station with cell service for 4 hours. And to this day, neither he nor myself have forgiven me for that absurdity.
I once stayed up all night to finish my boss presentation, which he in the end didn't even end up using.
I almost died at work the one time when I went into a very cold room to do a stock count. I was banging on the door for about 15 minutes shouting for somebody to help me, when it turns out that I actually just wasn't trying hard enough to open the door.
So I used to work at a fast fashion clothing store, and there was a thief who was trying to run out of the store, and I was like, hell no, that's going to happen. So I tackled him.
I was working as an intern at an advertising agency in New York, and we had this massive treatment due the next day. And as everyone started filing out of the office at 8, 9 o'clock, it was nowhere near completion. So my creative director came over and put a gram of cocaine on my desk and said, "This has to be done by tomorrow." I finished the treatment and slept on the couch in the lobby.
We asked you guys a couple of questions on Instagram around how you feel about your work. 67% said they thought of themselves as having a career and not a job. At the same time, 77% say they work to live and don't live to work. If that's how many of us feel, then what can we do to ensure that we make the most of the time we spend at work? Maybe we'll get some answers from a strategic happiness expert. Robin van der Meulen. You're here.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So maybe you could just start off by telling us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yes, so I'm strategic happiness expert at Today's Mood, and we measure how people feel in organizations. And based on that data, I advise HR, management, team leaders how to create a positive work environment.
How does someone become an expert at happiness?
Well, I think it started with my passion for sustainability. So I wanted to do something good for the world while working. And during my studies, I discovered that there's a social component within sustainability. It's the people in organizations that are also very important for success. So I followed courses in organizational psychology, HR, and I was inspired by my HR professor. He said, we are not going to only have a look at why do people leave organizations, why do they get a burnout, for example, but let's also have a look, why do we come to work with pleasure and energy, and how can we maintain those feelings in the workplace? And I thought, wow, that is really beautiful. Let's not only pay attention to the people who are screaming the loudest in a negative way and are complaining, but also pay attention to the people who are already feeling happy or satisfied, and come up with interventions to help everybody maintain that energy and pleasure in the workplace.
Right, and so you measure data around mood.
Yes.
What have your observations been over the last couple of months?
Yes, it's very interesting because I think we have around more than 40,000 surveys asking about mood in organizations. And what we've seen is that when Corona started, you saw an increase in stress. So first of all, people thought, okay, what is this Corona is going to do with my work? Can I maintain my job? So a lot of insecurity, and then luckily you see a decrease in stress in the beginning of March, half of March. But then now, it moved towards more dissatisfaction, and we measure that via tiredness and sadness, those kind of emotions. So you see that the energy is leaking somehow because we miss colleagues around us. Work-life balance is impacted by Corona, having your children at home, making longer hours. So we see a decrease in the excitement that people feel in their job. Now in Corona times. Right.
How do you see that the pandemic has affected how people feel about work and maybe the future of work?
I think what we've seen and noticed is that people starting to appreciate their employer more, and I think that's a very good thing, because maybe you take it for granted that you have this amazing work environment where you have good coffee, all the facilities that you needed, and now you have to work from home and you don't have that. In these Corona times, you see that there's more attention for well-being. So you see that organizations and also team leaders are not only asking how do you feel in your job, what is missing, what do you need, but also on a more personal level, how do you feel and how is it going? And I think that's something for the future of work I would wish to see, and would recommend to any team leader in HR to start asking that question more often. How do you feel in general? Also your personal well-being. Yeah.
So our subject today is work the new religion? What do you think of this idea that work has maybe replaced the source of meaning that maybe religion used to bring way back when?
Yeah, I think if people find meaning, that is important. If it's because of work or religion or something else, if you become a mother or a father, that gives you meaning. I think it's good that you have a sense of purpose. That's the most important thing. I think a lot of people find that in their jobs, but you should also see that a lot of people are realizing it might not only be due to work, but should also enjoy it and find meaning outside of work. So I think you should also always try to balance that, and not be dependent of only one thing in your life. Because if your job is if you get fired now in Corona times, it can be a big hit if you then only derive purpose from your job. Because I think if you get fired, you should still try to find purpose, of course, and not be dependent on your job for that.
So we've heard a lot of people articulate that maybe they want work to give them more meaning. Is there something as a happiness strategist that you can recommend they can do now?
Good question. I always think it's important that you work from your talents. So try to come up with a list of things that makes you happy in your work. It sounds very easy, but in my experience, it's very easy to write a list of things that you don't like about your job. That's how our brain is wired. But try to write it about what you like about your job, and then have a look, okay, how can I do those things more in my job? So really work from your talents. And I also think what gives meaning is helping others. So how can you use your talents to help your colleagues with their personal growth or their professional growth? Or maybe even outside of work, how you can use those talents to help others.
We spoke a little earlier about burnout. Now, you were saying that you want to maybe meet people way before they even get there. Do you think that a lot of what you do is preventative? Yeah, so we by measuring how people feel, we can see what's the stress level in organizations and what's the dissatisfaction. So are people feeling tired, sad, frustrated, and those are signals of maybe even potential burnouts that are coming or people that are leaving the organization. So yeah, it's very important to regularly check in with your employees. That can be done via a survey that we have, but also by just doing a weekly team stand-up, for example. And yeah, I think you can then prevent some of the burnouts by detecting negative moods in people, yeah. What role do you think work should play in our lives? I think, or I hope that people are not too dependent on work. Of course, you need it for income. And I wrote something about workism as well, that you can see work as a currency. So it helps you to also go on holiday and take time off or to meet with family. And I think that's very important, that you should always do that. So not only live to work, but also work to live. Thank you so much for joining us. The pandemic has allowed us here at Boomerang to reevaluate how we feel about our work, but more generally about our life. Maybe you've also spent months working from home, or maybe you're an essential worker and you've had to work while others didn't. Either way, the entire world has just had this big shared experience, and we're likely to be entering a new era. Thanks to our guests and our audience for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next Boomerang Talks. If you don't want things to end here, stick around for a 5-minute meditation.
This practice brought to you by Mindful, helping millions of readers and listeners find peace, build focus, tame anxiety, and build a future based on kindness and compassion. Join us at mindful.org/newsletter.
So find a relaxed, comfortable position, seated on a chair or on the floor, on a cushion. Keep your back upright, but not too tight. Hands resting wherever they're comfortable. Tongue on the roof of your mouth or wherever it's comfortable. And you can notice your body from the inside, noticing the shape of your body, the weight, touch. And let yourself relax and become curious about your body seated here, the sensations of your body, the touch, the connection with the floor or the chair. Relax any areas of tightness or tension. Just breathe, soften. And now begin to tune into your breath in your body. Feeling the natural flow of breath. Don't need to do anything to your breath. Not long, not short, just natural. And notice where you feel your breath in your body. It might be in your abdomen. It may be in your chest or throat or in your nostrils. See if you can feel the sensations of breath, one breath at a time. When one breath ends, the next breath begins. Now, as you do this, you might notice that your mind may start to wander. You might start thinking about other things. If this happens, this is not a problem. It's very natural. Just notice that your mind has wandered. You can say thinking or wandering in your head softly. And then gently redirect your attention right back to the breathing. So we'll stay with this for some time in silence, just a short time. Noticing our breath, from time to time getting lost in thought and returning to our breath. See if you can be really kind to yourself in the process. And once again, you can notice your body, your whole body seated here. Let yourself relax even more deeply. And then offer yourself some appreciation for doing this practice today. Whatever that means to you. Finding a sense of ease and well-being for yourself in this day.